All right, we're back with episode 26 of the Feel for the Game College Football Podcast. I've had a lot of time to cool down, Landon, since last week when Ole Miss ripped my heart out. It was an awesome game. So we got a lot to talk about here, but obviously I'm very disappointed because we both picked Miami to win this game or lose this game, and Ole Miss to advance to the national championship for the first time in our lifetimes, and technically for the first time ever, if you want to say that anything before probably 1990 doesn't really count. That's probably fair. But Ole Miss had their chance. It came down to the final play, and of all people, Carson Beck closed this one out.
Well, I mean, y'all got the type of game you wanted. Miami was shooting themselves in the foot a good bit. Y'all were able to hang in there, but it just came down to their bully ball winning out in the end.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen a team play the style of play they played in a postseason game and not dominate. Like this was the kind of attempt and performance from Miami that you would see in a we're better than you, we're going to beat you by 4 or 5 touchdowns and put our backups in kind of attempted performance. They ran the ball, what was it, 51 times in this game? I mean, they it felt like the whole first half, all Miami did was run the ball, stretch, it was inside zone, it was trap, ISO, duo. They were running all over us and we could not stop them for the life of us. It was 4 yards a carry consistently over and over and over again. And it just felt like every single crucial third down or fourth down, it was less than 3 or 4 yards, and they got it every
It
time.
just seemed like it was first down and 10 to second and 6, third and 2, and then first down and then repeat.
Yeah, rinse and repeat. There were a couple of like really bad missed tackles from Ole Miss defenders.
There was one that cost y'all 4 points.
Yeah, Suntarine Perkins had an open field tackle on Malachi Tony when he was basically already wrapped up. Or I say that he wrapped him up. He missed the really easy tackle there, and then Sage Ryan just flies in there and whips the tackle. And then Malachi Tony breaks both tackle attempts and gets the first down. That one was a bad one. We also had a chance to take down Mark Fletcher in the backfield on a backwards pass that got thrown into the ground. Fletcher's like trying to pick it up. He's gonna be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage at this point. Once again, Suntrain Perkins had it was just him, the sideline, green grass, and Mark Fletcher, and he missed. I had to explain this one to my dad because we watched it, and my dad was furious because it was one of those plays where when you have your best defender in open space, you expect them to make a tackle when somebody has no forward momentum, right? And Mark Fletcher was bending over to pick up this football, and he was kind of quartered away from Suntarine. So Suntarine's just thinking, I got to get to this guy as fast as possible, and I got to take his head off and dislodge this football so we can pick it up. Because the ball's on the ground. It's not just to bring him down, we get the 5 yard loss. It's, oh, if I hit him hard enough, this is going to be a bad deal for Miami. Like that ball's up in the air, somebody's going to get it. And right when Suntarine commits and puts his head down, Mark Fletcher picks up the ball and pivots out like you would see somebody catch like a stick route or a comeback route. Like their first move is to pivot back to the open field. That's what Mark Fletcher did, and Suntory just completely whiffed. So that one sucked because that was like 3rd and 16 or something. I don't know. It was a long yardage they needed. It would have been even longer if we had just gotten the tackle. And we don't make the tackle there. Another drive extended for Miami. It was just a mess. Like I said it the whole first half, it felt like Miami was clearly better in the trenches, but as far as skill players were concerned, Ole Miss had the advantage. And at the end of the day, when you're better in the trenches, you can wear down other teams with depth at skill positions. You don't have to be elite at wide receiver or elite at running back or elite at quarterback if you've got the best offensive and possibly defensive lines in college football.
Yeah, and I think something else too that was big was the time of possession. What was it, like 41 to 19?
41-22 Miami, 18-38 Ole Miss. And that got narrowed down in the second half. Ole Miss actually did better in
I
the
think it was
second half.
22 to 8 in the first half.
It was worse than that at one point, I think. But Ole Miss in the first quarter was almost on pace to have less than positive yards. They were gonna have negative yards because they had one drive, I think, and we had an intentional grounding, so that counted for negative yards. But we were struggling because Miami just hogged the ball the whole first half. It was I told somebody this. It was like watching Army if you had given them a slightly different offensive playbook and NFL caliber trenches. and they just ran the ball the whole time. And when they needed a screenplay, they got it every time. It was almost too predictable. Like you see that people are like, "Oh yeah, third and 7, don't call a screen. That's the dumbest play call." People only call screenplays just to be conservative and go ahead and punt. Well, Miami seemed to get a first down every time they ran a tunnel screen. So that's how it kind of rolled the first half. Going into the second half, Ole Miss just had to turn it up on offense, and they overcame the time of possession deficit, the total yardage deficit, and they started to steal some momentum back. But Miami just kept doing their thing. They didn't really slow down. Ole Miss maybe got a couple more stops, not many, but Miami just ran this game. It was the closest blowout I've ever seen, if that makes any sense. And I'm not gonna say Ole Miss didn't have a chance to win because we literally were winning with 2 minutes left, but I've never felt more defeated and still in the game than watching this game as an Ole Miss fan.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good way to describe it. I mean, if Miami would have turned in their performance that they had against Ohio State in this game, it probably would have been 2 touchdowns closest, you think?
Yeah, their performance against Ohio State, specifically on the defensive line, I think would have really been tough for Ole Miss. But I say that I think Ole Miss's offensive line deserves some credit for this game. Everybody was writing the script for this game being Ole Miss is not going to be able to handle Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, and they're going to get manhandled on both tackle positions. Trinidad's going to get sacked 10 times, and Ole Miss is going to lose the game. They're going to try to throw it on every down, and they're going to end up in 4th and 20 on every drive.
And that was
That's
not the case.
that's what it felt like everyone was saying, but that was not true. I think if Kawan Lacey stays healthy in that game, Ole Miss is going to be able to run the ball, and that opens up the passing game. And Ole Miss still basically walked down the field against Miami on several drives. To be fair, I'm going to be the only Ole Miss fan probably to say this. Trinidad played a great game, but he also escaped probably one of the worst performances of the season. He started off very slow in the first quarter, but that wasn't really his fault. I think that Miami dropped 3 or 4 interceptions in this game. When I say dropped,
Yeah, that was a huge
dropped
thing.
3 or 4 interceptions. Like you could put an average male on the
You
field
can put us out there and we're catching those.
and give them. I didn't want to give us too much credit, but I think we could.
Give us that credit.
We'll take it. But you could put an average, like middle-aged male on the field and throw those footballs to them, and I bet you give them 5 tries, they're catching one for sure. And say the same thing about the players. They probably get another chance. They're picking all of those. But one of the ones that was hilarious to me was all the Miami players in that big mosh pit. And that ball got tipped by, I think the wide receiver went up to catch it. And it gets like swatted out of his hands down and hits a Miami player. And they all knock the ball around. And then one guy literally has the ball at his chest in his hands. And he's bobbling around and then just drops it.
Some NCAA 14 looking junk.
I've never seen a dumber looking play on the field than that one. And not that, look, those kind of plays happen really, really fast on the field. So, yeah, it's going to happen sometimes. But see that in a playoff game in a very, very, very important situation, and Miami doesn't come away with turnovers there, that's tough. That's where you should put the game away. That takes all the win out of Ole Miss's sails when you get those interceptions that they could not convert. Lots of phantom PI calls, lots of no calls, lots of phantom holding calls, lots of just really weird sporadic calls from the officials in this game. Targeting was strange in this game. You had a targeting from Miami where you've got a player that's going to miss half of the national championship game because he got ejected in this one. And then Ole Miss had a player, very, very close call, get kept in the game, and the targeting call was overruled. I thought that was the right call, but it more just exposed to me that we don't really know what targeting is. Somebody else has said this already, I'm sure, but we saw the targeting hit where the Miami safety got ejected. It was probably targeting, but the announcers were all like, "Oh, uh, I don't know about that. That doesn't really seem like targeting to me." And then the official guy from Birmingham phones in. He's like, "Yeah, this is clearly targeting. This meets all of our criteria. He's going to be out." And they ejected him. And everybody was like, "No way!" And the first one, Ole Miss, all the announcers were like, "Yeah, that's targeting." And then the officials came in. They're like, "Yeah, this is probably going to be targeting." Or I said the officials. The guy in the box came in and phoned into live television and told us it was going to be targeting, and it wasn't. So I would love for somebody to explain to me exactly what quantifies targeting. In my opinion, I think if you have a upward launch, clear thrust of the crown of the helmet or shoulders straight to the head of an opposing defenseless player, targeting. Anything else, I think, should be overruled and not be targeting.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And it seems like what these referee crews are doing is just interpreting it their own way because there's just no consistency across any crew or nothing, it seems like.
No, there's not. And because you've got different conferences, that means you've got different crews, and different crews are managed by different people and different conferences. It's just too much differentiating between what you're getting in conference play, and then when you travel for the postseason, you're getting different crews. It's just, I hate it. It's stupid. Something has to be done about it. But I didn't love the officiating of this game. The first half was super clean. Nothing was called. They didn't call anything. There were so many no calls in the first half on both teams. I want to be very clear. This is not me penalty groveling for Ole Miss saying we should have won the game. We had so many holds on Mesidor and Bain that didn't get called. I was shook that we got away with as many as we did. Same for them. I thought there was a hold on the final play, but I'm not keeping receipts of saying we should have won the game and Carson Beck should have scored the touchdown. That's just one I'm citing. There were several times we'd have a defensive tackle literally getting like air hogged by their center. And it was just like, at what point do you call all of them? Do you call none of them? Or do you pick and choose? Just pick a lane with holding, in my opinion. So that they really struggle with that. And honestly, that's what you're going to get when you've got elite edge rushers going against not so elite offensive linemen. I can say the same for Ole Miss. We had a really good day rushing the quarterback, I thought. I think we actually had more sacks and TFLs than Miami, which, like we talked about, that's kind of a flip on the script that nobody's really talking about. I think we had, let's see if I can pull this up. I don't actually have it on me. I thought I had the stats pulled up. We had 3 or 4 sacks and maybe 6 TFLs. They only had 1 sack, and it was on the intentional grounding. So they never actually hit Trinidad Chambliss with the ball. He got leveled several times without the ball. That's several of the other penalties that didn't get called. I'm actually more worried about those because Trinidad could have gotten hurt in that game, and we absolutely would have been out at that point. As soon as he gets hurt, our chances end immediately. He got leveled way too much in that game without the ball in his hands. So that was clearly a problem.
I found some of those stats. Y'all had 4 sacks and 5 TFLs. Miami had 1 sack and 1 TFL.
So I just think that's really strange. A lot of people were only harping on the fact that Miami was going to win because of their defensive line. And I was worried too. I was worried that we were going to be able to block them. But Ole Miss's offensive line has improved so much the whole year. Like, the beginning of the year, our biggest question was like, oh, Ole Miss looks sketchy. Offensive line play against Georgia State was really bad. Lots of people were saying that. A lot. I was saying that. Kalon Lacey was struggling to get yards at the line of scrimmage. He kept getting bottled up, and give it 3 or 4 weeks, he's the leading rusher in college football, or at least I say that. He's the leading rusher in the SEC, and he was like second or third in the country in total touchdowns. And then Trinidad was one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the nation. So you got to give credit to Ole Miss's offensive line. At the end of the day, Miami won this game 31-27, and I think that had a lot to do with 2 guys I want to highlight. Obviously, Carson Beck deserves as much credit as we can give him. That one interception really wasn't his fault. You have a probably decently accurate pass that just happens to get deflected on the line of scrimmage and intercepted by Ole Miss. That was really his only mental lapse of the game. Everything else was kind of there for him. He made the right throws. He did what he needed to do once again, and he won his team the game with his play. Against Ohio State, we said the same thing, but I was really wondering if he could actually move the ball down the field. Ole Miss's defense clearly a notch down from Ohio State, and he proved that to be true. Coverage busts were a big issue. Chris Graves on the outside really struggled in that game. Um, we had a couple of pass offs in zone coverage that just didn't get picked up. Those were bad. Man coverage one on one, we got cooked several times. Um, Overall, though, Carson Beck played really well. He's shown a lot of improvement. He looked like week one Carson Beck, which, if you go back, we were actually really high on Miami after week one, and we saw how he was playing. If he kept that up, we were thinking they could have been probably where they are now, or probably not that far, but pretty close to it. And then we had the regression, and we had the games against SMU and Louisville. So we've made it here, and Carson Beck is at the pinnacle of college football, which is crazy to say. After 2 years of scrutiny, he's finally made it to the big game. And then Malachi Tony had a really solid game. His elite speed and quickness, mainly shown on that tunnel screen where he broke that one off. He's going to be a problem for the next probably 2 years. So just having him back for Miami is a big deal. They're returning a lot of talent and recruiting well.
Something that's really surprised me about Carson Beck these past few weeks is him just randomly deciding to start running now. And it's been very clutch. It was especially clutch in the Ohio State game, and then in this past game, scoring the game-winning touchdown on his legs. And this is a dude that like seemed like he could barely run for a lot of his career.
Yeah, I thought that was a really big part of the Ohio State game. We mentioned that. Nobody was talking about it. He converted on so many really important first downs in that game, or just got yards that give him a chance, and they were tough yards.
And it's not even that he's like fast or something. It's just the perfect awareness to know when he has the space to get the yards he needs.
Exactly. And Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers were really good at that. They would obviously they are not very quick, and Aaron Rodgers maybe a little more quick than Tom Brady. But when they saw green grass, they were football players. They're gamers. They're gonna get the yards. They're probably gonna take a hit when they don't need to, but they're gonna get the yards. Carson Beck did that in this game also. He had a couple other big runs where it was just like we finally had him stopped. We had a coverage sack coming, and he steps up into the pocket. A big gap opens up, and he's like, "Okay, give me the yards," and he'll take off. 10 yards, first down, slide. Or maybe he has to take a hit and run out of bounds. Whatever it looks like, Carson Beck was doing it, and I think it was giving Pete Golding and this Ole Miss defense fits because we were just doing everything we could to cover their wide receivers and try to get pressure. We did get pressure sometimes, but it was on a lot of dialed up blitzes and really good one on ones. So Carson Beck had probably one of the best games of his entire career in this playoff game. Revenge game since he lost to Ole Miss in Oxford 2 years ago. That was a really fun game. I was at that one, but he played well. Malachi Tony, like I said, elite speed and quickness. The tunnel screen touchdown was big for them. It just bad tackling and non-preparedness for the obvious play calls that were coming from Miami. They just knew that unless there was a coverage bust or a really good one-on-one, all they had to do was run the ball at their screens to win this game. That was pretty clear from the get-go.
Yeah.
I think the only reason Ole Miss had a legitimate chance in this football game, as a team, Ole Miss was really cohesive and really explosive, but Trinidad Chambliss was just a total baller this season. Ole Miss would not have been within 3 touchdowns of this team if Austin Simmons was the quarterback.
Y'all might be like 8-5 right now if he was the quarterback.
100%. And I'm sorry, Missouri fans, but that's the truth. I think that Austin Simmons has a lot of progression to go through before he's really ready for SEC play. We'll get to that in a little bit as we talk about transfers, but to wrap this one up, third and fourth down conversion percentage was a big one. Ole Miss was 2 for 10 combined on third and fourth down. They actually did not attempt a fourth down conversion in this game, which if you had told me that, I would have probably thought that we handily won the game. Like we just couldn't stop scoring touchdowns. When Ole Miss is in contested games, we go for it on fourth down. Pete Golding has shown that we make different play calls in different situations. He took field goals in this game, and it gave us a chance. I prefer that style of play, to be honest with you, but Miami was 13 for 21 on third and fourth down.
Jeez.
You cannot win a football game when you give up over 50% on third and fourth down and time of possessions over 40 minutes. You're not going to win. Ole Miss somehow almost had a chance and had the lead with 2 minutes left. Uh, it's just, it's beyond me that Ole Miss had a chance to win this game. Miami dominated so many different categories that are really important. Nick Saban said the same thing to Miami's head coach Mario Cristobal in the post game. He's like, "You guys should have been up at halftime by like 2 touchdowns easily." And Cristobal, being a Saban disciple, agreed and probably was disappointed that he wasn't. So I was just impressed that Ole Miss was able to hang on, but all that due to Trinidad Chambliss. That dude's a beast. We'll talk a little bit more about him, considering the pending waiver trial that he's going through right now. That's a big storyline for him and Ole Miss. But this game was awesome. Um, I don't think you're going to be able to win a game when the other team has 41 minutes time of possession, over 50% on third and fourth down, and then their leading rusher was averaging 6 yards per carry on the ground. You're not going to beat it. So Ole Miss drops in this one to 13-2 and is eliminated from the semifinals of the playoffs, and Miami moves on to play Indiana. I cannot believe that this was such a hard game to pick, but Indiana versus Oregon was a complete slaughter. complete slaughter. This game, and I rarely will ever say this, felt like it was over after the first play. This was probably the quickest final blow or earliest final blow in the history of college football, at least in a supposedly big game.
I tried to tell you, we were on a call before the game started, and I had a feeling. I was like, this is about to be belt. And then it was. I mean, yeah, the first play pick six, just, I knew it was over, like, right then. Like, they were just not going to come back from that. And they sort of did. They immediately went down the field with like a 8-minute touchdown drive to tie it, but they could just never get any closer than that.
Yeah, that was all that Oregon had in the tank on that touchdown drive. They pulled out all the stops just to bring the game back to even. That D'Angelo Pons pick six was just it was a work of art. Like you rarely ever see DBs get that aggressive on the opening drive, much less the first play. But man, that's film. That's film. To know that they're gonna come out with a screen on the first play and jump that from as far back as he was, absolutely impressive stuff from D'Angelo Pons. I saw something the other day that the state of Indiana temporarily named a pond after him. I thought that was
Yeah, I
really
saw
funny.
that. I saw that.
That's cool. But he's been a real impact player for them. I think he's from James Madison. He came with Signetti when they moved over last year. So he's been a huge pickup for the Hoosiers. I I genuinely I really wanted to pick Oregon in this game. I'm not gonna lie. I almost did. We spent a lot of time talking about it. We were back and forth. I just after seeing what this team did to Alabama, I was like, why on earth would I pick this team to lose right now?
You just couldn't do
They
it.
already beat Oregon and kind of
It
handily.
was at Oregon too.
I just wanted to convince myself that Oregon had the stones to go head to head with Indiana in this game. Indiana was hot, and technically Oregon was hot, but that defense didn't show up in this game.
I think the turnout that Indiana got fan wise helped a little bit as well.
100%. That's huge. And Ole Miss was one of the other teams in the playoffs that had really great turnout. But Indiana fans traveling for this game, very big
It
deal.
was like 90 to 10 Indiana fans in there probably.
Yeah, that's hard to beat in a neutral site game like that. It's far away from your home state. But Indiana was just hot knife through butter in this game, offense and defense. I mean, the defense had so many big plays in this game. You had the strip sack, you had the pick six, you had a couple other big time plays in the backfield. They were just living on the other side of the line of scrimmage in this game. I thought Dante Moore played all right. He didn't have his best game. He didn't play horrible though. If you showed me the score, I would have predicted a disaster class from Dante Moore, like 4 interceptions. That was his only interception, I think.
It was.
I hate that for him. He's obviously coming back next year with a new backup quarterback, which we'll talk about for one final go at things with Dan Lanning. I think that team's going to be hot next year, but this is going to leave a bad taste in their mouth going into the offseason. I think that's going to impact them a lot. After getting blown out 2 years in a row in the playoffs, they've got to make some changes in that program physically. I think you're probably looking, and I'm not talking about just they've got to work harder, they got to be more conditioned. I think it's going to have a lot more to do with game planning against teams that are more physical than you and also recruiting the right players in the trenches to be able to compete there. They had a lot of good athletes. I think they may be going for size, maybe to help them out in that department. But at the end of the day, Oregon gave the game away early. They never had a chance. Mendoza was absolutely surgical. Another game where he had more touchdowns than incompletions.
Yeah, I mean 5 passing touchdowns with 3 incompletions. It's absurd.
Yeah, and I think that our talks about him winning the Heisman could come off as us possibly being haters with Mendoza. I like Mendoza a lot. I think he's very good. And if anything, players that can step up on the biggest stages and be better than they look on regular season stages, those are the guys you want. Regular season matters because that's what gets you there, but when you make it there, how do you play? You don't want to be a Drew Aller. Nobody needs a Drew Aller. Oh yeah, well, I can throw for 150 and 2 touchdowns with 80% completion percentage all season long against Purdue and Wisconsin. But when I see Notre Dame or Ohio State or Oregon or Michigan, I'm gonna go crawl into my shell. That's what you get from guys like Drew Aller. Fernando Mendoza probably played two of the most perfect non-forceful football games at the quarterback position that anyone has played in the postseason. When I say non-forceful, I mean like he didn't have to throw the ball 50 times and throw for 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 picks to win the game. He threw the ball 20 times in this game for 175 yards, and they won 56-22. And they didn't run for 300 yards. They still ran the ball very well, but they just scored. He puts the ball in his playmakers' hands and they score touchdowns. You cannot, as a defense, do much against a team like that that just continues to score. Like you go back on the field after they've scored on you 4 or 5 times in a row, and you're like, can we even get stop them and make them kick a field goal? It's so deflating. And Indiana just wore down on Oregon in the first quarter. By the end of the first quarter, it was obviously a ball game. The game was over.
Yeah, another a big stat that I'm seeing here that's just ridiculous is Indiana being 11 for 14 on third down.
Yeah, we rarely see that.
And then in the
Rarely.
red zone, 5 for 5 touchdowns.
This team to me just screams team of destiny. Like this team, national championship written all over them. I'm gonna have a really hard time picking against them against Miami. This team has no flaws in my eyes. I think the only way to beat this team is to get significant pressure on the quarterback without giving up coverage because he is way too surgical, Mendoza is, to leave gaps in the defense. He picks up the blitz better than any quarterback in college football, maybe other than Trinidad Chambliss. I've seen Trinidad pick up blitzes all season long. He just escapes a lot more of them than Mendoza does, and Mendoza gets the ball out quicker and takes more hits, which is that's a franchise quarterback thing. When you have a guy that knows that he can't evade the rush and he takes hits to deliver throws, you've got your guy. But Mendoza, I think, is solidifying himself as probably the number one pick of the draft after this.
Yeah, the most impressive thing to me about him is just the ball placement. It's just unreal sometimes.
His pocket presence and his ball placement, despite what the pass rush looks like, there's not many guys in the NFL doing that. And obviously, he's playing college right now, so we don't know what that's going to look like when he gets drafted. But I think if I'm a scout and I'm a head coach, this is a guy that if you build a good offensive line around him, he can pick you apart. He reminds me a lot of Jared Goff, a lot. The similarities mainly in the fact that he will stand in the pocket and take those hits, but his ball placement is so good. He anticipates throws that you don't even see the guy breaking over the middle of the field. He's already thrown the ball. I mean, those receivers, they're probably seeing the ball at their face about to hit him in the face mask. They're 2 steps out of their break. So he's elite. This team is elite. I think that I think Signetti's got this team in a better position than maybe any team we've ever seen. We had this debate last week. I really think that with how they finish the season next week, we could start having that debate between them and the 2019 LSU team and the 2020 Alabama team.
I think that's definitely something that could be talked about.
We'll definitely circle back on that. But for those of you who are looking at the box score of this game, don't.
It's really weird.
I would tell you the box score is a lot. So don't look at it. If you're going to look at it, the first place you should go is here. Go check out Indiana's defensive stats. Indiana had 3 sacks and 10 TFLs. Oregon barely got any pressure on the quarterback in this game. I think that that's a clear definition of this game. Out of all the stats that you can point to, other than maybe third down conversions and red zone percentage, which that doesn't show up usually on the box score, Indiana's defensive line really impacted the game. It was obvious from the get go. Mendoza, 17 for 20, 177, 5 touchdowns, and 28 rushing yards. Another insane performance. This team is loaded with unproven talent that ended up blossoming under the right coaching and the right scheme and a lot of hard work. I love seeing that. I think this team is reshaping how people are looking at college football right now.
And talking about the stats a little bit more, I think one of the things that really skews them and makes them weird is just how disastrous those Oregon turnovers were. I mean, the pick six is a touchdown for Indiana, which shows no yards. They blocked a punt, got the ball. I'm not sure where that put the ball, maybe like the 15 or the 10 or something. They had the whole fumbled handoff Dante Moore thing that put the ball at the 5 yard line. What was the other turnover? Was there another one?
I forget. There was another one, I'm pretty sure, maybe, but regardless, that's already 21 points, which
Yeah.
could turn into how many of a point swing? Way too many, right? So I think that's probably where a lot of this point spread lies at the end of the day.
And then
I
too,
wouldn't,
Oregon in the second half just playing from behind. Indiana kind of gave them a little cushion and they threw the ball a bunch. But I mean,
yeah,
at that point, they were already down like 30 something, so it didn't matter at all.
it was definitely a late stat padding from Oregon, but that team still had a lot of talent. To beat a team like Oregon as badly as they beat them in this game, you have to be legit. And when you've only got two teams left, it's hard not to look at this team and be like, yeah, they're easily a 10-point favorite in my eyes. I think I guess the line for the national championship right before they put it out, we were on the call after this game, and I said, what do you think the line's going to be? And I forgot what you said,
Like 10 or 9.
and I said 7.5, and it was dead on the money, 7.5. It's probably moved since then.
It's 8.5 last I saw it.
I think it probably should be higher than seven and a
I think
half,
on Kalshi it was 9.5.
but it's not good for TV to have a 10-point line or even a 9-point line. Two possession line on the national championship game, that's not good for viewership.
Yeah, it's 8.5 right
So
now. So
it's probably not going to move past 8.5. I don't see that being the case. If anything, I bet it moves that back down to 8. Um, 'Cause for some reason, there's people picking Miami in this game. We'll get back to that, but I just think that's crazy. All right, moving on to our next segment, we're going to get into a little bit different of content as we hit the end of the season, unfortunately. That doesn't mean football content has hit its end. We're going to talk a little bit more about the transfer portal. We have a lot going on right now. It's absolute chaos. We're going to try to save a lot of this for next week. Is we'll literally just have the national championship game to preview to review and talk about because we'll have the results next time we meet most likely. That'll be the last game. It's been a really fun college football season. It's felt short at times just because we're getting to the end, but we've been doing this for like half a year now. So crazy to even believe that it's been that long. We've been talking about football on this podcast. We're going to talk a little bit more about the transfer portal, recruiting rankings, potential for next season as we build up to spring camp. I want to talk about the big quarterback landing spots that we've seen so far. We got quarterbacks like Brendan Sorsby, who dropped to Texas Tech. I think we mentioned that last week. $5 million deal. That's a huge one for the Red Raiders. Not having Baron Morton come back. Obviously, they had a hole to fill there, and they wanted a more athletic quarterback at that position, and they got him.
yeah, for sure. I think it could be a game changer for them. He did have some up and down performances this year at Cincinnati, but he'll be surrounded by so much talent at Texas Tech. I think it'll work out well for them.
Yeah, I think this was a really deep quarterback class in the portal, probably the best one we've ever had. There's probably been better quarterbacks in the portal before, but I mean, you look back at like Jackson Dart and Caleb Williams and Cam Ward; those guys are generational for the portal. But I feel like overall, there's a lot of depth at quarterback in the portal. So we'll talk about who we maybe think is a little more overrated or underrated maybe next week. But Brendan Sorsby to Texas Tech is a good one to watch. I think there's some good things from him that could elevate this team. I think there's some things to watch too that may be a problem. Dylan Raiola lands at Oregon, not as the starting quarterback, or at least that's what it looks like. Dante Moore was a projected first rounder this year, and he's electing to go back to college. So with that being said, Dylan Raiola has committed to Oregon as well and plans to be the QB2. Probably the best QB2 in college football right now.
Yeah, really interesting decision if he's actually going to stick around and stay there without starting. He seemed like a guy to me that would have to go somewhere and start immediately. I mean, given that he's played, this is his second year starting at Nebraska.
Yeah, 2 full years
Yeah,
at Nebraska,
it's just
minus injury.
strange to me. I don't know.
So I look at it like this. I've heard a lot of people say that Dylan Raiola was like fitting a square peg into a round hole at Nebraska. That's the best way I can describe it because I've always felt this way. I never really thought that he was all he was cracked up to be overall as a player and a talent composite. But Nebraska is just not where winning quarterbacks have been going, period. Offensively, Nebraska has not been producing at a high level. I think Adrian Martinez was the last quarterback I saw there that like legitimately did anything, and he struggled there too at times. Nebraska is just not a team that if I was a 5-star quarterback, I'm looking at saying, yeah, I want to go there. I don't care how much money you're offering me. there are other schools that are probably offering me close to that, if not more. So I struggled to understand that commitment in the first place when he was committed to Georgia. So now he's at a school where if he was the starter right now, I think that this is a way better situation for him. A lot of people are going to be confused by this. I was kind of confused. Here's how I look at it overall. Him being at Oregon and getting to sit behind Dante Moore with Dan Lanning for a whole season and rewire how he thinks about offense and how he plays the position and his mechanics, he could have a Bo Nix-esque season in 2027. And people could have totally forgotten about all the bad football we saw him play. He can rewrite the script in one season and still make money this season, heal up from his injury, and prepare for 2027 and go all in. I think that's a good deal. A lot of people are like, "Oh, he probably wants to play. I can't believe he's going there. He must think he's going to be the starter." Unless Dante Moore goes down with an injury, he's not going to be the starter. I just don't see that being the case. There's no way Dante Moore's coming back unless he's guaranteed the starting position, especially with a first round or early second round grade. So I expect him to recover mostly into fall camp and into the season. And if Dante Moore gets hurt, he'll play. That's probably, and he'll probably get some reps in garbage time in games because I don't think he's going to need the year of eligibility because 2027 is his all out year. Whether he gets a red shirt or not, I most likely anticipate him declaring in 2027. So, interesting pickup there. Really interesting one to watch. Sam Levitt committed to LSU this past week. Everybody's been waiting on LSU to get a legitimate quarterback. And not only did they get Sam Levitt, they got a guy from Elon. I think he's been pretty solid. His name's like Landon Clark or something, maybe. He looked decent. I watched some of his film on a post, and he could be a viable backup option. They also got Hussein Longstreet from USC, former 5-star from last year's class. I don't know anything about how this guy plays. I have not seen film. I'm sure there's plenty of it. Haven't watched it. But apparently he's got a lot of potential. That's 3 quarterbacks in this room. So let's talk about Sam Levitt. I think that there's a lot of upside for this quarterback. I think depending on how the offense changes from this year, it is going to impact him the most. We saw what his bad looks like. We were at the state game this year in Stark Vegas when he threw for 82 yards. There's a lot of haters who are like, oh, he threw for 82 yards against state. He threw a pick. He got sacked a bunch. He played terrible.
He threw 2 picks.
Yeah. And then there's going to be other people like, he was injured. Like, he didn't play his best game. Yeah, he didn't play great. Maybe fighting an injury. Regardless, that's his low. You don't get much
The injury comments are just cope.
I think that that's a possibility. I was there. He ran a lot in that game. He looked like he was healthy. And then he had some really, really poor throws. But State's defense wasn't that great this year. They were good at defensive back, and they had a couple guys, but they were not cohesively a really great unit this year.
I mean, we were good in those first 2 games, and that was basically it. But
So,
we did lose our best defensive lineman in that game, Will Whitson, who's going to be back next year for us. But
yeah,
he
that
was
hurts.
wrecking havoc that whole game. And then when he came out is when they started to run the ball down our throat.
Yeah,
They
that
went
was
back and took the
an
lead.
impressive
So,
performance for them to be able to run the ball out in that second half and
and I think,
still lose.
yeah, and I think he was having a big impact in that game, helping our defense out. Anyways,
But yeah, Sam Levitt overall, I think he's got a lot of talent, but I really struggle to put all of my faith into that position for LSU right now. With the depth there, I think that's great for them. If they hadn't have gotten the insurance of Longstreet and Clark, I think there'd be a lot more questions from me. But Lane Kiffin always is going to have his guy, and then he's going to have somebody else behind him. But for him to go out and get 3 different transfers after overhauling the whole room, I think that's good. I think that's a good play. LSU fans are going to be really bummed if this doesn't work out. I mean, this time last year, LSU was a preseason top 8 team, and Garrett Nussmeier was the Heisman favorite and #1 overall pick favorite. He's probably not going to get drafted in the first 3 rounds of this draft. If he does, I would be shocked. He would have to have a really good combine, and somebody's going to have forgotten this season happened. And then LSU's offense just was inept all season with way too much talent at wide receiver, running back, offensive line, quarterback. They had to put in another quarterback that was a really good starter for State the year before, and Michael Van Buren, which we'll get to in a moment, and he struggled in that offense. So it's not necessarily just a quarterback problem. Obviously, Charlie Weiss Jr. is the offensive coordinator there now. Lane Kiffin's the head coach. They brought in their guys, but crazier things have happened than chalk offensive play from Lane Kiffin. So I wouldn't bet on it, but if I want to bet on anybody to have one of the best offenses in college football, it'd be Charlie Weiss and Lane Kiffin. So things change, things can happen. Lots of roster turnover for LSU. Pretty much all of their offensive linemen through the whole roster are gone.
which is not a bad thing for them.
Not necessarily, but anytime you've got to overhaul unproven talent at the offensive line position and possibly even guys that we don't know how they're going to scale to the next level being at LSU, you're going to be playing against defensive lines like Georgia and Alabama and Texas, and they're not playing all those teams next year, but you're going to be playing against elite defensive lines next year if you're LSU. You better be prepared on the offensive line, or else none of the position players, none of the offensive coordinators, none of that matters. None of that matters if you don't have a good offensive line. So LSU's got to get that figured out. Sam Levitt's got to progress this offseason tremendously and cut out the turnovers and the disaster games.
And
But
just stay healthy this upcoming year.
I would think so. They've recruited really well at wide receiver and a couple running back um, transfers, and I think they had some key departures. But Caden Durham is recommitted to LSU, so he'll be back next year. A lot of people are comparing this offense to 2023 already, so you already know LSU fans are
Oh
getting ahead
man,
of their skis when they start saying stuff like that. Hopefully, we don't get into recomparing to 2019 at any point. So that's where we're at with Sam Levitt. I think I'll keep an eye on him. I'm not going to get too ahead of my skis there, but he's got a lot of talent. Byron Brown to Auburn from USF. I'm probably the most excited about this one just because I love Byron Brown. I think he's a beast. But I've been saying it all year. He reminds me of Cam Newton, but for him to end up at Auburn is crazy as a transfer. I think with what they're bringing in around him, as long as he has a good offensive line, I don't see I don't see where the line is for him and as far as he can take this team. They're probably going to have a good defense. They've lost a ton of players on both sides of the ball, but they've imported a lot of guys too. I see this team being competitive this year more so than last year, and they were competitive this year. So I think that Byron Brown's going to be a huge impact player in the SEC. He may be in the Heisman race if Auburn ends up being a decent football team. If he ends up being the whole offense and the defense sucks, probably not going to be in that conversation past the first three games, but he's going to put up some crazy stats this year in the SEC. I firmly believe that. I think he's really good. Deuce Knight to Ole Miss, I think, is another one to watch from Auburn. A lot of potential, not a lot of film at the college level. Barely any, actually. But originally from Mississippi, Ole Miss and State both missing out on him was a tough blow. But to see him back in Oxford, if he ends up being the starter this year, he's got a ton of potential.
yeah, I mean, super talented guy. I saw a little bit what he did because he started the Mercer game, and yes, it's against Mercer, but some of the runs he had were just unbelievable. Some really accurate passes in that game. Ton of talent, ton of potential from that guy.
Yeah, he layers the football really well too. He's got a lot of arm strength, and I've noticed from watching him that he does a good job taking it off the ball if he needs to, and then he can add layers of velocity to it. So you love to see that with the level of athleticism you get from him. He's like not as quick and fast, but he runs similarly to Lamar Jackson. I say that's probably a little bit of a stretch. He picks his lanes very well and he breaks tackles.
I think him and Kamario Taylor are similar players.
That is true. Kamara's going to run over guys. Deuce is more slight a frame, but he has this really very, very subtle jump cut, whatever you want to call it, juke move. In open field, it doesn't look like he's moving very much, but guys just whiff when they try to tackle him. Again, it's Mercer. They could have just had a bad tackling day, but man, he was picking some great rushing lanes and he steps up and climbs the pocket really well. I like him a lot. We'll talk about him more probably over the offseason, but I think Ole Miss got a good steal there. They actually just picked up Walker Howard as well today. Returns to Ole Miss after stops at LSU, Ole Miss, Louisiana, and then back to Ole Miss. I don't think we'll see him on the field unless there's an emergency.
Seems like he's gonna go the grad assistant route when he's done playing ball.
That sounds
That's
right
kind
to
of what
me.
it smells like to me.
I like Walker Howard just as a person. He's a nice guy. I think he's good for the room. I think he's good for the culture. He'll be a good backup if he gets on the field. Hopefully, he can get things together this year. So Ole Miss, decent quarterback room. I think that probably one of the most underrated pulls of the whole cycle at quarterback is Michael Van Buren. He left LSU after leaving state the year before. He had a good situation at state. He really did. I thought he was probably going to cement himself as the starter and probably could have been on a really much better state team this year and done well. Chose to be a backup at LSU behind Garrett Nussmeier. I did not think he was going to see the field unless there was an injury. Garrett Nussmeier gets injured, and I just did air quotes just so people watching on podcasts can see that, obviously. Um, he was injured, but not really. Just kind of played poorly, and they took him out. So Van Buren goes in, plays better than Nussmeier did, in my opinion. I thought that the Texas Bowl was his best game of the season. He looked great. I think USF got a steal. I think if you get a more polished version of what you got from him at Mississippi State freshman year, you've got an elite quarterback. He's got all the tangibles. His deep ball is very impressive. He's really good at intermediate throws over the middle. He's very solid. And to be honest with you, he's really good at creating. When plays seem to be dying, he's really good at just picking up extra yards. He's not gonna blow you away with extreme speed or quickness, but he just gets yards when he needs to. So really great player. I think USF got a steal there.
I think they're going to be a team to watch out for next year. I think they're going to be very good. Probably, I think they could be better than this year.
I think they may be a sneak in playoff team with people writing them off after all these departures. I think Brian Hartline's going to get this team squared up. And I think with all the transfers in from Ohio State and a lot of other key programs, and then you get Michael Van Buren at quarterback, as a passer, he's better than Byron Brown. Obviously, you can't lean on the quarterback run as much, but man, he's going to be a big pickup for them if they can get their system down there. I think Brian Hartline's going to have a lot of fun with this team next year. Wanted to highlight a couple more players that we saw mainly going to Texas. Cam Coleman, Raleek Brown, and Hollywood Smothers all committed to Texas this week. I think that that's probably the biggest string of commits that we've seen so far at the skill positions.
Yeah, I mean that's just massive for Texas, and those are just huge needs that you can obviously see throughout this season, and they got it done.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are doubting Texas with all the departures. They're starting to piece things together. So we'll be watching Texas through the offseason heading into next year. I think we've got a lot to talk about with that team, especially given how Arch Manning finished the year. Lastly, I wanted to cover the top five teams in the portal right now, which is some of these are recurring visitors, but some of these are first timers. LSU number one, not close. They have like 28 commits right now. And a lot of that has to do with not only Lane Kiffin being there and the money they have in Baton Rouge, but lots of roster turnover. This team had to bring in 28 plus transfers. There wasn't an option.
Yeah, I mean roster exodus is just going to kind of skyrocket some teams' rankings, having to fill that.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of people who are like, oh, LSU's got the best class. They're going to be the best team in the country next year. They're going to be top five. Program turnaround inbound. Very possible. Not ruling that out. But anytime you've got as much roster turnover and coaching turnover as this team's about to have, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's not going to be chalk every time. If anything, returning production is not always chalk. So, sure, LSU could turn right back around and have an Indiana year, and they could go from very mid to absolutely unstoppable in 2 years. I don't see it happening in 1 year. I think Lane Kiffin needs an extra year with his offense, probably to get things going. And defensively, Blake Baker's going to have to get things sorted with a new roster. So they could have probably the best offense in college football if things go their way. And you could see a 2023 repeat, except their defense really struggles to get talent on the field. So LSU at number one, Texas at number two, mainly because of the big pickups we just mentioned. They don't have many commits, but they're getting the big guys. They're getting the guys that everybody else wanted. Big steals that Alabama and Texas A&M were all over. So I think that Sark's got to be pretty happy with what he's getting there. I'm sure they'll get a couple more commits before the cycle ends. Penn State in the top four. They're overhauling, obviously, if most of their team's been poached and is left for Virginia Tech with James Franklin. I fully anticipate this team to take a step forward from this year. With Matt Campbell, Rocco Beck at quarterback and a lot of the skill players they're getting in and depth pieces, I think they'll be able to turn it around a little bit and get back to their winning ways. I'm not going to expect a double digit win season from them, but I think they can replicate kind of what Michigan did this year. Win the games they're supposed to win, probably drop the games that they're expected to drop. Somewhere in that 8 to 9 win range, depending on how the roster ends up being finalized, I feel like is reasonable for them.
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty realistic to what I've seen them add to their roster.
Yeah, they look like they've got some guys that maybe some unsung players and Iowa State possibly hid some of those gems from the rest of college football this year with the kind of offense they play. I think they got some good players. One of the biggest surprises to me was Oklahoma State, seeing them in the top five. They were what, 2-10 this year?
No, 1 and
They were
11. The
1-11.
one over UT Martin.
Unbelievable. So they bring in Nestamaker, Caleb Hawkins, Wyatt Young, and a plethora of North Texas players, which immediately can turn a program around. They're all elite. They're bringing in a bunch of other guys from all over the country, trying to piece together a roster to be competitive on both sides of the football. I think it's possible. I think they can be competitive this year. They're going to find a way to score points. I firmly believe that Eric Morris and this team will score points. But defensively, it's going to be a big question mark. If all those players pan out and they get a couple extra steals, they could be okay. I just have a hard time seeing this team put their rally caps on defense this year and put together something decent. So I think that this is going to massively change the trajectory of that football team moving forward from being 1-11 and firing your head coach this year. I expect it to be a lot better for this team. You get Drew Mestamaker with 2 more years of eligibility. He's a beast. Caleb Hawkins led the nation in total touchdowns. He's a beast. Wyatt Young was one of the best receivers in college football. You can't go wrong with that trio. I think they'll be solid. And then rounding out the top five is Ole Miss. They've got a lot of key commits on defense. I think if you give a couple of those to this team this year, they're dangerous. And obviously, Ole Miss was a top 14, but Ole Miss with a legitimate secondary and heavy presence on the defensive line would be really tough to play against. You get last year's Ole Miss defense with this year's offense, that's a borderline competitor for Indiana in the national championship. So I think that if Pete Golding gets things together on defense, this offense is not going to take much of a step back in my eyes. I don't think that John David Baker is going to replicate Charlie Weiss's offense perfectly, but very, very similar system, almost identical. Play calling's not going to stray too much. I like Pete Golding's conservative approach, maybe not going forward as aggressively on fourth down and trusting your defense a little bit more. I think this Ole Miss team could be more cohesive than any we've seen in a long time next year. So I'm excited. I think that the top five teams in this portal are going to be fun to watch going into next year. You got teams that are trying to completely rebuild. You got teams that are trying to add on to an already successful program. And you've got teams that are trying to meet expectations that are sky high that they haven't met in a while. So lots of different teams to look at there. I don't see Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, or Georgia. Not necessarily concerning, but something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I've noticed too. Those teams are pretty far down on the
Yeah,
list.
Alabama specifically very far down, and we'll go into a lot more depth in episodes to come on transfer portal updates. We're going to talk about guys that we think are underrated, maybe guys that we think are overrated, different teams that we think, based off of how they're reloading their roster, could perform next year. We will get into that more, but for today, we just wanted to hit on some high notes in the portal because there's just so much to talk about. But that's going to do it for today for the transfer portal. We're going to move on to our national championship prediction. All right, the big game is finally here. This is our last game preview and breakdown for the whole season. Tears. This is kind of sad, but at the same time, like this is such a great game, and a great matchup that I'm pumped about it. We got Indiana taking on Miami at Hard Rock Stadium for the national championship. It almost felt like Miami was destined to make it once they, against all odds, got into the playoff. Being able to play in their home stadium for the national championship hadn't been done in a long time. For this team to be there is a big testament for Mario Cristobal and that squad. After we doubted them so much this season, for them to be here is really funny, but also really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent just about my whole like life knowing football, just hating on Miami and calling them overrated. But And they found a way to overcome that this year, even with the two bad losses they had. They're still here.
Yeah, they could get blown out in this game, and I don't think that this season is looked down upon by anybody.
No, I mean the path they had to take to get here was so difficult. They've earned all my respect.
Absolutely. Carson Beck especially. A lot of doubt was shelled towards him pretty much all season at different points.
I'm not gonna give him credit yet because I am the biggest Carson Beck hater on the planet. Said that in the preseason.
We did establish that
He's
early.
played well, but he's gotten to play behind like the best O line in the nation, like good running game. He gets in the NFL, he's not gonna have that. So we'll see later down the line for him.
We'll see how that plays out. We'll be watching him for sure. Tracking a lot of these players in the NFL will be a fun conversation to have on the podcast. But let's get into the matchup breakdown. So to me, I really would love to get in depth on this and talk about a lot of stats and get all nerdy about it. But Indiana to the moon, Indiana by 100. It's SIG season.
And they
I,
clear in every stat anyway.
at a certain point, a team is better than another team, and you go with the best team. Indiana is the best team. I'm picking Indiana to win this game 37-21. I just don't see how you miss with that. If Indiana loses this football game, as God is my witness, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Not because I'm gonna crash out because I want them to win so bad, but I just don't know how you beat this team if you're Miami. You would have to have Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain each have 3 or 4 sacks apiece.
Yeah, I mean that's the only way I could think of that they would have a chance of just getting to Mendoza, but nobody's been able to do that all year. So why is this going to be any different?
I don't think it is. We saw Ole Miss not manhandle Miami's defensive line because they got pressure, but keep them at arm's length from the quarterback. Obviously, Trinidad's a different player. He's a gamer, but he's a different player than Mendoza with his ability to escape the rush. Mendoza absolutely can avoid a sack in certain situations, but he's going to have to do a little bit more than Trinidad is to get away from this rush. I think that Indiana's offensive line is a level up from Ole Miss for sure. Um, that's going to be the difference maker here. This is probably the second or third best line in college football. I don't see Miami getting a ton of pressure in this game, to be honest with you.
Mendoza's also very decisive and gets the ball out pretty quick, which is also something that Trinidad does, and that helped him out in that game, and it's going to help Mendoza out here again. I feel like.
Yeah, Mendoza was surgical for the past 2 weeks. I fully don't anticipate that to change. I think that he's going to have a very similar performance here. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 5 touchdowns in this game, no interceptions, and only 2 incompletions, but I think we see several touchdown throws. I think we see a high completion percentage, probably no turnovers, and if things go their way, I think this game will end up being a multiple score deficit for Miami.
Yeah, I feel like it could get there. I'm not going to say my scores yet, but I don't know. I figured that the Oregon game would be. I had it being 31-20, and then right before the game, I started feeling like it was going to be a massacre for some reason, and then it was. But and maybe I'll feel the same way before this one.
Yeah, after watching what they did to Alabama and Oregon, both teams who have beaten really solid competition this year, I just, if you really want to get nitpicky, you can go to the Penn State game and you can probably go to the Ohio State game and say, those are the games you need to watch out for if you're Indiana. And if you're Miami, the only film you've got is those games. I mean, there's not another game where it was close. Indiana's margin of victory this season is, I think, one of the best of all time.
I think their average like win is like 45-13.
That's insane.
I can double check that.
And according to the common college football
No,
populace,
it's 44-11,
it's ridiculous.
so slightly worse.
Well, the common fandom populace would say that the Big Ten is the best conference in college football. So if that is true, then Indiana just ran through the best conference in college football with a basically 30-point plus margin of defeat all season. Uh, I'm done with the Glaze train here, but in all seriousness, Miami is going to have the game of a century, lifetime to beat Indiana here. And if they do, the ball is going to have to bounce their way several times. The referees are going to have to make very, very confusing calls in this game like they have been. So that's a possibility, but it can't be against Miami. They're a heavily penalized team, struggle with turnovers. Indiana's going to take advantage of that. Period. End of story. I don't think they'll be able to run the ball as effectively against this team. Mark Fletcher's gone over 120 in all of these games in the playoffs. I don't know about this one. I think this one's going to be tough for him. Indiana's defense is so good. They're so good at capitalizing on the opponent's mistakes, and they just force a ton of three and outs and turnovers. There's not many weaknesses on this team. I think Mendoza finishes off this season 16-0 and proves why he should have won the Heisman.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm expecting as well. Like I just, it would be such a massive upset. I mean, an 8.5 point spread in the national championship game is just absurd with some of the ones we've had in the past. And something else too that doesn't have to do with on the field. I'm curious to see what the fan turnout ends up looking like at this game. Like as far as how many Indiana fans versus Miami fans, because it is at Miami, but I have a feeling that it's going to be more Indiana fans in there.
There's no way.
Just watch, it will happen.
If it happens, that's going to be one of the craziest storylines ever because that I know obviously the stadium is an hour away from campus, but they're going to have students there. They're going to have a ton of locals there, like so many. There's going to be tailgates out the wazoo.
Well, they'll win the tailgates, but in the stadium, just watch.
With ticket prices, I mean, I had a hard time seeing the stadium even getting filled up, but it's gonna. There's gonna be people there. It's unbelievable what
It'll
those tickets
happen.
are getting to right now. I'd be really surprised if they got to 30% capacity at this game. They totally can. I'm not saying they can't, but I'm not in the inner circle, so I have no idea what's going to happen.
All I can say is just wait.
Indiana's been doing it. We'll see if they can here, but I guess the only thing on Miami's side here, in my opinion, is probably their two edge rushers. I guess you got Malachi Tony, and then you're playing in Miami. You got to hope that that's enough to give you a chance.
Yeah, I mean that's just the consistency of play that you get from Indiana is just so hard to overcome. I mean, Miami's gonna have to match that and just have some difference making explosive plays with Tony and Fletcher, and then their DNs have to go nuts. Like just so much stuff has to be right for them to win this game.
I just don't see them getting enough
And
of that.
Indiana has to just not be uh like the robot they've been. Like they have to make some mistakes for Miami to win. If they make no mistakes and both the teams play their A game, Indiana's gonna win.
100%. I think probably I'll be watching this the most. Obviously, all the things we listed are probably the most key factors in this one, but rushing yards in this game from Indiana. I think that if they can't run the ball, that changes things. Miami's one of the best run defenses, if not the best in college football. Ole Miss exposed a little bit of that, but when Kwan Lacey got hurt, very quickly they became pass heavy, and they actually were able to lean on the pass in that game in the second half. I think Indiana's going to have to run the ball well if they want to thoroughly win this game. If they don't run the ball well, I think they still will win, and it'll just be closer. That's really it. They would have to have a bunch of unlucky turnovers and struggle to run the ball to lose this game. I don't see either of those things happening. I think Indiana probably goes for over 4.5 yards per carry in this game, and Mendoza is once again very surgical, and I think they cap off a historic season with a big win here.
Greatest story in college football history.
I think, and I heard somebody else say this, so I'm not going to take credit for this. I wouldn't necessarily call Indiana a Cinderella story, but they're about as close as you can
Well,
get.
there's been story in general.
Yeah,
It's definitely
that's what people have been
up
pinning
there.
it as. Like, it's the greatest Cinderella story ever in college football. Well, they're a team in the Big Ten, in the Power Four, that has history. Obviously, most of their history has been very bad. That's, in my opinion, what gives them the leg up in the Cinderella story headline is that they're up until this year been the most losing program in college football history. I think maybe behind Purdue. So they haven't been great. For them to have these past two seasons is absolutely unreal. Cursing Nettie is probably gonna have 100 statues built after this season, and probably for seasons to come after the success they're having. I think that this is probably one of the best stories we're gonna see. Definitely gotta enjoy the moment while we got it and watch one of the most historic teams we've ever seen go to work next week. I think it's gonna do it for us though. This was a pretty chalk prediction for me and Landon. I have a really hard time seeing this one being close.
I actually didn't
I was
say
about to
my
say, do you
I
want your
didn't
score?
say my score. 31-17, but would not be surprised if it's worse than that. I think that's like the closest it could be.
Yeah, I think Carson Beck's gonna try to go to hero ball late in this game. I think that we haven't seen it from him yet.
Carson back over under a pick and a half.
I'll take 2 picks.
Take 3 picks.
That's pretty ambitious there. But
You're gonna
yeah,
be forcing the ball late when they're down 20.
I see that being probably the case. He's gonna have to. I don't know if he throws all the picks, but he's gonna have to force the ball late in this game. Once again, chalk pick for us. Indiana to the moon. I'm excited about this one. Can't wait to talk about it when we come back. Final game prediction of the season.